I just started it. That's probably why.
Well, they sent me a link to it, but it's not showing up. It's really weird. What's up?
You would definitely hear a tornado coming because they will play an air raid siren. They did it the other day at like midnight, 1 a.m.
Well, that's useful information.
Yeah, so you'll definitely know it's coming.
Okay. I mean, I could just look out the window, too. It's getting pretty crazy. I'm going to go get a beer.
Okay.
Are we live? We're live right now.
Yes, we are live.
So you're ruining this whole thing.
Funny as crap. You're live with who? Doing what?
All right, so I'm going to grab a beer. Chuck, entertain us for a moment. And,
Okay.
If Nick wants to keep making a nuisance of himself.
Also, sing along. It's not going to be tonight. It'll probably be next week, simply because of the fact that I have some crazy, complicated things going on right now in my life. So it has just been really, really busy. So I have not had time to actually sit down and prepare it. Is the issue?
I totally muted that before I left.
What's that?
Nothing. Don't worry about it. How's it going? How's everyone doing? Huh?
So
we're going to talk about American history,
or maybe just history in general, and we'll dive into some American history. I don't know. Let's see where it goes.
Okay. What do you think about George Washington? What's up, Robin?
I don't think that George Washington was an inherently bad person. As far as what I've been able to find out about actual facts about him, he was a Freemason, which doesn't necessarily mean anything because they're like, unless you're a high level Freemason, like you probably don't know like that you're in a cult.
Well, the whole Freemason thing, didn't they get, from what I hear from everybody, I don't know much about it, but the thing I heard was that the Illuminati supposedly dissolved and then invaded the Freemasons.
Well, the Illuminists are still a group, so I would say that they haven't dissolved, but it is a branch of Illuminism.
What's wrong with being a Freemason?
The fact that they, well, that's a different discussion almost entirely. A lot of people would say nothing, but the Freemasons undergo a lot of very, very paganistic, cultish ceremonies, if you will. And they do a lot of very anti-God things when you become part of their organization. You basically have to swear that you will be loyal to their organization above all other things, and then a lot of crazy stuff happened.
Was that true? Was that true even 300 years ago?
Oh yeah, like if it came from Scottish Rite Freemasonry.
Huh. Okay, well, so we know he was a Freemason. What about the fact that almost all of the paintings and whatnot of him are him praying? There's a lot of journal entries of people interrupting him when he prayed. I mean, there's a lot of evidence based off of his letters and everything that he was a very devout Christian. Like the one that stands out to me was when he was in the, which is why I always liked him. He was writing letters to, I think his sister or something when he was in, I want to say Braddock's army during the French and Indian War.
Mm-hmm.
And he killed the Frenchman, and then that became international scandal, and everyone thought he was a bad person all over the world. And his diary was captured and made public all over the world, which is embarrassing. And everyone hated him. And he said, "I'm going to leave this service." And then he had that ambush that happened, and he was sick, so that he couldn't get up. He had to sit on a pillow. He was very sick, diarrhea and everything else. And 6 foot tall, 6'5", something like that. And during the battle, he rode his horse up and down from the front of the battle to the end of the battle. And this is an ambush where a lot of people were getting killed. And he had like 10 bullet holes in his clothes or something, but he never got shot. And then he wrote a letter after that saying, he was a hero from that. He wrote a letter after that saying, it shows me that God has something for me. I'm going to stay in the military. about that?
Well,
That you heard?
I've heard the story before.
The letter isn't told about it. What he personally said about it, where he was talking about providence and God and how he was thinking about getting out, is fascinating. That's why I always liked him. You know.
But there are other conflicting historical accounts.
Okay.
He didn't particularly like church, which is neither here nor there, because you can be a Christian without wanting to be in church. But there was a I think he was a reverend who would constantly get him to confess that Christ was the King, the Lord, or whatever, and he refused over and over again to make that statement, which again doesn't deny the fact that he believed in God, because he may have believed in God the Father and just been like, no, I don't believe that Jesus was the Son, which I don't know why you wouldn't in that day and age, but maybe that's a belief that he held. But that also could be because of his Freemasonic ties. So I mean, it could be a complicated situation, and it's not up to me to judge whether or not, like, what the condition of his heart was. So I don't.
Well, that's interesting. So you don't think
it is.
You don't think he was inherently evil then?
No,
Was
I think that what he believed, that what he was doing was right. So, and I don't think that he inherently had any ill wishes, like, to accomplish anything inherently evil. So, but I'm just not, like, I don't think he was the saint that a lot of people made him out to be.
Well,
But again, which of us are? I mean, like I said, it's not that I necessarily believe that he was a bad guy. I just don't necessarily believe that the account of the type of person that he was is entirely correct.
I remember I read a biography about him. It was probably called George Washington. I could pull it up really quickly if I wanted to, but it said we weren't sure if he was a Christian, and then the reasons it gave was because he didn't go to church every week. He went to a church when he was in Philadelphia. He went to a different church every week to get around all of the different people that were involved in the decision making. So he was kind of getting himself known to everybody.
Yeah.
As they were deciding things. And then when in church, when they told him to stand up, when everyone else was standing up, he would sit down. When everyone else was sitting down, he would stand up. He would always like do the opposite. So
Yeah.
he struck me as just a rebellious sort of Christian, and I'm the same way, so I get it.
I mean, yeah, and I've heard some things that are very, very much like that. And it seems that he oftentimes, like, when they would pray, he would get up and just leave. Like, he just didn't want to be there. Like,
Yeah.
he went basically
I
because
do
his
that
wife
all the
wanted to go, because it was like a social thing, standing thing, and his wife was like, well, we need to be part of this, and he's like, fine, I'll go. And he's like, he just, I guess like halfway or 3/4 of the way through the service, he'd just get up and leave. Or if somebody pressed him to do something that he didn't want to do, he'd just get up and leave. Which, again,
makes him sound like me.
it makes him kind of a little bit more of a figure that I would want to associate with in that day and age, because, like, he did stand up for what he believed. But I just there's been some questionable things that I've looked into that I was just like, oh, that seems a little off to me. But again, maybe he was just a really off person. So it's not really my place, like I said, to judge his heart, because maybe he was just the type of person that was like, I don't deal with this religious stuff. My relationship with God is just between me and God, and I'm not gonna do this religion thing. Like, that's not for me. So, like, there's enough statements that I would substantiate that he did believe in God in some form or fashion. But and there's another side of it that's like enough to make me substantiate that maybe he didn't see things the way that other people did. So,
that would be a great Christian. But it could also be a not great Christian, which is
why I don't have enough context yet, and I haven't dug deep enough into it yet. And I mean, there's a on Now You See TV on a series called The Midnight Ride. David Carrico and John Pounders went into George Washington really deep, And I don't, I remember it was fascinating, but I don't remember a lot of the content. So I mean, that's out there if you want to, if you or anyone else that's listening wants to go check that out. So
it's curious. Okay, what do you think about John Adams?
John Adams.
Do you think much of him?
I'm trying to remember what I know about John Adams. I know he was one of the founders. He was one of the early ones that signed the Declaration of Independence. And he was Secretary of State, was he not? For a while?
He was the first vice president under George Washington, and then he was the second president of all of the presidents. Him and Thomas Jefferson could lay the claim most, like him, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington could all claim a claim at being the original founder of America. If you were going off of time period, John Adams was the first one to believe in independence. Thomas Jefferson obviously provided a lot of the documents and whatnot and the writing, and he was the most atheistic of all the presidents, seems to me. And then
well, he was a decided Freemason. Jefferson was. I know a little bit more about Jefferson than I do Adams. I don't, like, history-wise, I haven't dug a whole lot into Adams.
Well, me being from New England, obviously I know more about John Adams than Thomas Jefferson.
SR said he lives in Mount Vernon. It's a highly debated with evidence that he was a Christian and evidence that he was very confused spiritual person, but he definitely had Christian roots.
Which is about where I would put it. I mean, that's a real Christian. John, that's
no, he was talking about Washington.
I know. Well, Washington, that's where a Christian would be, where they would walk their lives with God and figure things out with them and the Holy Spirit. John Adams is a little more traditional in that he had Christian parents. He was actually the conservative of the time period, where he believed in monarchy, and he almost wanted to create a monarchy in America. He just didn't want to be under the British. And he was he got his son into office. He wanted his grandson to get into office. There is still a John Adams alive today. It's like John Adams the Eighth. And
wow.
It's very, because New England, obviously, those cities were very pro-Anglican, but they were also the first ones to rebel against England when they started taxing them. But you got to remember that the founding fathers really loved English tradition. They were saying, we're the ones who are really, they're basically doing the same thing that English people have done throughout all of English history, which is rebel against London. But his religion was Unitarian, which is not the same. Most people, when they hear that, they think of Universalists, which is not the same thing. That Universalists believe that Buddha and Muhammad are the same as Christ, and there's many ways to God or whatever. Unitarians just didn't believe in the Trinity, which is interesting because listening to Vox Day, I don't think Vox Day believes in the Trinity.
I believe in the concept of the Trinity, but I don't necessarily believe in it in the way that other people do. As in, like, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are like the same person. Like, I don't believe that that's true at all. Like, but whereas, like, I do believe in the Trinity as being the Father, the Son, and the Spirit of God. They are always in agreement with one another, but they are not the same being. Like, that doesn't even make sense, and it's not supported scripturally at all.
Yeah. It's one of those traditional Christian beliefs that is considered to be absolutely necessary. That is not, like, you don't need to believe in the Trinity to be saved. You need to believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You don't need to believe that you don't have to have the exact way of believing who they are. And I've come to question it. It seems interesting, and it seems there is something about that relationship that's reflected in creation repeatedly. But the Holy Spirit doesn't seem to be a person to me. It seems to be more of a a spirit, not a person like Christ or God the Father. Now, Riff said that Adams was pro free speech. Adams wasn't pro free speech at all, just so you know. I know you're making a joke there. It's funny, but he wasn't. Thomas Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists were the ones who pushed the Bill of Rights. Washington, Adams were both big on just the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. Adams didn't believe in free speech at all. He was the one who passed the Alien and Sedition Act, where you could arrest journalists for committing treason based upon what they wrote. So free speech wasn't even agreed upon by all the founding fathers.
And it's crazy that we're getting back to that fairly quickly now, too.
We are. I mean, we are. That's the thing. It's like every time period like this that we're going through right now, this happened at the end of the Roman Empire, too.
Yeah.
Or the French Revolution. Or
very, 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 very hefty similarities.
It's repeated throughout history. And there are times in history where it happened and then they didn't have a major bloody revolution, but it's more likely there is a major bloody revolution. It happened where everyone started getting the spirit of intellectualism and figuring these things out, because we'd taken them for granted for so long. And now you can't take them for granted. I mean, we have to argue everything else, especially the elements of our faith. So far, John Adams and George Washington seem to be basic Christians that were just very active in the world.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't necessarily know whether I would say that they were. I would say that I would give the caveat that they appear to be good Christians, based off of what we can gather about them.
Sure, they have as much evidence suggesting they were Christian as any Christian alive today, I would say.
Sure, but with the advent of them being Freemasons, to me personally, that raises a flag as to where their loyalties lied, because that organization is extremely known for having placed a lot of people in positions of power.
Yeah, but being a Freemason back then is almost like being a government employee today. It's like,
most government employees today are Freemasons, as are all astronauts, as are like the list.
What about like teachers and just cops?
Depending on your level of involvement in those agencies, you start digging into a lot of them. Like, I'm pretty sure like it's either every president or it's a high percentage of presidents have been Freemasons.
And the thing is that the Freemasons were a social group primarily. So if you wanted to succeed socially, if you moved to a new town, you join the local church and you join the local chapter of Freemasons, so you can get to know people, especially if you want a political career. So,
and that's why I want to do some digging to find out, because if, like I said, most people that are in the bottom levels of Freemasonry, it basically is just a social club. Yeah. But the more you climb that ladder and the more that you
I have no doubt that men in the position that they were in had to make a decision at one point or the other who they were going to serve. I think the same thing happened with Napoleon and Julius Caesar. In fact, I think and this is before Christ. Napoleon isn't, but Julius Caesar is. I think Julius Caesar was killed and usurped, not really usurped, but replaced by his adopted son or his nephew or whatever, Octavian. I think because he chose to be I think because he had second thoughts. That was the tornado warning, by the way.
So, okay. I would say that's probably true. He probably bucked the system. He probably made a decision that was not received well by the people that were really in charge behind the scenes, and they basically.
Are you talking about Julius Caesar? Are you talking about Julius Caesar?
Yeah.
Well, that's more complicated because he, it's as much as I can tell from him. What's interesting is when he finally got what he wanted and he took over Rome. Cato obviously was dogging him at every step. and Cato ended up committing suicide when Julius Caesar was crowned emperor or whatever. And then he was so upfront about, it's almost like his heart changed. He's like remembering why he was doing it, because the reason why Julius Caesar was popular amongst the normal people was because all of the rich people in Rome had so many slaves from all the successful wars that the farmland was owned almost entirely by them, and regular farm workers were pushed out of business. And so Julius Caesar's big thing was land reform. It was land redistribution, which at first I'm like, that's communism. But now, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. I mean, the Bible talks about land redistribution after Jubilee, and their government was falling apart because there was, probably 10 times as many slaves as there was free people in Rome. Because
it's interesting too that the Jubilee year was never observed after they had a king. Never.
What about, was it you I was talking about with Ahab and Jezebel? No, it was I was talking to somebody else about this last night or the other night. It was a great Christian counselor of mine, but he said that Ahab and Jezebel were killing people to get their land, and that there was no Jubilee year.
No, the last time that a Jubilee year was declared was by Jesus.
What about before Jesus?
It was before Saul became king.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, what about after they came back from the Babylonian?
No, like Jesus was the first one after Saul to declare it. That's why the exile had to take place, because the land had to lay dormant for the years that they didn't allow it to lay dormant for.
Hey, have a good one, Riff. He's an interesting guy.
Because every 7th year they were supposed to let the land rest, and every 50th year they were supposed to have the Jubilee year, and that's like, that was the count of how they were to keep track of times and seasons and days and so on and so forth. And they absolutely stopped that entire cycle once they had a physical king.
What about when Hezekiah or Jehoshaphat, I can't remember, they brought out the book of the law and read it?
Yeah,
that was
like that would have been when they would have tried to reconstitute it, but I think he only reigned for, that was Josiah, I think, when they read the book of the law. I think it was Josiah, and I think he only reigned for, they repented, and I think he only reigned for a very short amount of time and was killed. And that's when Jerusalem was sacked the second time by Babylon.
Huh. So what about the founding of the United States of America? Corrupt bargain? What's that all about? What do you think?
I think originally it was it had good intent. When the Protestants came here, they were trying to find a land where they could practice their religious beliefs, which basically they were like the Reformed, like super Reformed church. They were very
radical, Puritan.
Yeah, they were a very radical church because they did a lot of the stuff that of what's coming back into popularity again in the Christian church, where people are leaving the church because they're looking at the church and saying, well, wait a minute, you guys are doing things that this specifically says not to do, and you're not doing these things but it specifically says to do. And then the church is like, well, we can't stand you, get out. So like, it's basically what's happening again, which was what was happening then, is they were actually looking at the scriptures for the first time and reading it and going, well, wait a minute, you guys are doing all this stuff and it doesn't say to do that, and you're doing all this other stuff that it doesn't say to do, and you're not doing this other stuff that it is saying to do. So what the heck is the deal here? And they're like, get out. So they're like, or either that or they just killed them because for heresy, like.
Well, so they did take over. Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan, and that was a big event in the English Civil Wars. But basically, that's why I don't trust the King James Bible, because it was written during that time period, shortly after that time period when they wanted people.
Well, the original was a lot more complete, and then they revised it. Yeah.
Okay.
It was revised into the King James Bible, and then it was revised again because there was an earlier version of the King James Bible, and then there was the second published version of the King James Bible, which they went in and revised after the Council of Nicaea.
So we're talking about the period of roughly 1600 to 1650, something like that.
Right.
100 years before the Declaration of Independence, which is
Right.
important because if you're going to understand American history, that's when it starts.
Yeah. So they came here to set up
one colony.
Yeah.
Colony. Not all of them, one of them. But a lot of them, there were a lot of religious based colonies, but most of the colonies were just contracts, merchant contracts about how to. Well, what happened is merchant groups would get together and form a trust, a cooperative, a corporation, and they would then propose to the king what they wanted to do with the land, and then they would talk about how to exploit the land, and then pay the king tariff and taxes. And the king didn't want to deal with it too much because he was fighting civil wars at the time, and so a lot of this stuff happened under benign neglect. But the people who they ended up sending out to that a lot of times were religious separatists that wanted to go and succeed someplace away from the Church of England.
Yeah.
So it is a lot. So how does that lead up then to the Declaration of Independence? What do you think about America as a country from the beginning?
I think in the beginning it started off on the right foot, and it was founded under Christian principles. And then I think that after the Declaration of Independence, and more so after the Civil War, is when things started going downhill. After the Civil War, religious freedom was instituted more, and it allowed a lot of the shall we say, Jesuit type religions to come in.
Okay.
And the Jesuits combined with the Freemasons are they're the guys that take countries out.
Okay, so you actually like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the original founding fathers.
I don't like the Constitution as a document, no.
Say again?
I don't personally care for the Constitution as a document, no, because its primary purpose is to usurp God's law. So, but I think that it wasn't. I don't think that was the intent of it being written.
Well, let's read the Constitution and go to it bit by bit, and then we'll talk about.
This is what I've been starting to get into in my study of the law, and the study of rights and freedoms. Is what the actual legal terms that are stated in the Declaration of Independence and things of that nature are actually referring to.
One thing that might be interesting to look at is the Mayflower Compact. Because that would be
fascinating to go over.
That was written by Puritans.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at that first, and then we'll talk about the Constitution and compare them. And if we have more time, because I talked about Washington and Adams, the first two presidents. The next president is Thomas Jefferson, who obviously was involved in the founding. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, most of it, and it was edited by other people. But one thing that's interesting about Jefferson is he's the one who sets the next political. He's the one who essentially founds a political dynasty and keeps it going right up until Andrew Jackson. And then Andrew Jackson changes the parties again. So when John Adams and George Washington are around, there's two major political parties: the Federalists, who believed in the Constitution heavily, and the Anti-Federalists, who believed in the Bill of Rights heavily, essentially. And then Jefferson comes in as an Anti-Federalist, and basically he actually founds the original Republican Party, is what they called it. And then the Republican
there was
Party,
the Whigs too, right?
The Whigs is way later.
Okay.
The Whigs isn't until 1850.
Okay.
And you're talking about now 1800 to about 1814, something like that. And it's the Republican Party, and then the Republican Party goes away because what happens is Andrew Jackson comes in and splits the Republican Party in two and forms the Democratic Republicans versus the regular Republicans. And then the regular Republicans go away, and it just becomes the Democrats. And Andrew Jackson founds the Democrat Party originally, and then FDR created what the Democrat Party is today. And then obviously Abraham Lincoln doesn't found the Republican Party, but he is a big part of it. He's the first Republican president, but he really shouldn't have been, for all rights and intentions. I'm sure you have a lot to say about Abraham Lincoln. Anyways, he is considered typically as okay, so this is from Wikipedia,
the most trusted source for information on the internet.
Yeah. What? Maybe I should find a different one.
Yeah, it don't matter. Just read it. It's fine.
Okay.
It's probably mostly incorrect, but we'll go with it.
Well, this is the Mayflower Compact. Okay. Well, I can try to read the original writing. The original document has been lost, but 3 versions exist from the 17th century. One of them was by William Bradford. In the name of God, amen. We, whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, etc., having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and the honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these presents solemnly and mutually, in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil-bodied politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof do enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and officers from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the reign of our sovereign Lord King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th of Scotland, the 54th, Anno Domini 1620.
Interesting.
So, a lot of God in that. Very just referencing God like crazy. And you can hear it. They're like, we serve God, and we want God to lead us. And so, therefore, we're going to make ourselves into one body politic, as they call it. And then whoever God raises up to lead us, we will submit to them.
But it's interesting that they state that their allegiance was to the king.
They say loyal subjects of our dread sovereign.
Yeah, which would state that that is who they claim allegiance to in the language.
Well, they don't say allegiance to him.
Well, when they say that our Lord, our Master, our Baal.
Sure. Huh. It's interesting, though, because they talk about the advancement of the Christian faith. It would almost be like, there is a part in the Bible where it says to listen to the government people that God puts above you.
It says to, be subjected to them, but not to serve them.
Well, that's why it says the loyal subjects.
Okay.
You know what I mean? This is as best as you could possibly get, right?
Well, short of being like, we claim this Holy Scripture as our, Constitution and law book, like that would be preferable to me, but like.
It's interesting. Okay.
And we claim this land in the name of our sovereign Lord Jesus Christ. Like, I could even take that.
Well, the fact that King James owned the land, and then they were given.
Well, I wouldn't say at that time that he owned it. He had laid claim to it, but I wouldn't say that necessarily gave him ownership of it yet.
Well, they did own it because there were other. This was not the first colony. There were other colonies in Virginia. Of course, they didn't end up being in Virginia. They ended up being in Massachusetts because of a difficulty with navigation.
Yeah.
But
the argument could be made that the land was already owned and he was conquering it.
Okay. Well, if they were going to legally say, King James, you own this land, and you gave it to us, therefore we are subject to you. in this land.
That would make sense in that framework, yeah.
So do you think it's a good document? I mean, just
I would say that it is a good document with their intent, but that the legality of it is horrifying.
Okay. So
The reason being is because, like, you could say, like, in today's world that the president is your leader, right?
Yeah.
But you would never say that the president is your master.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's true. But it was different back then. They lived under a monarchy.
Yeah, I know, but that was the trick of what God even told them, and you know this back in the day when they said and they had judges that ruled over them, and they were like, "We want a king," and he's like,
"Oh
no,
yeah, we want a king." No,
he's like, "No, you don't," and this is why, because I'm your king, and you should want to have me as your king. This is going to cause you nothing but problems. And they're like, "No, no, no, we want a real king."
Would you compare? See, here's my basic understanding of the Bible and our current period in history. Is it seems to me like we are essentially living in the book of Judges, and God is raising people up to lead us. Because the word president, it's a word that means first citizen. It's all it means. It doesn't mean anything. It just means first citizen, president. That's why the French called themselves the first citizen, the leader. So, which is why I've always predicted that there would be a monarchy that came up at the end of this period of American history. I always figured we'd go under dictatorship next, and
yeah, I believe that it will happen because
most likely it will start with a conservative dictator like Oliver Cromwell. That's what I
probably think. Yeah. And the thing that I look at is like judges are the prescribed method of rule according to God, because you're not supposed to have a king. He's supposed to be the king.
Then wouldn't America be a great government then?
Not necessarily, because they're following the wrong law book.
What about at its founding?
I'd have to read up on it, on how it was founded because, like, in my opinion, it doesn't, like, the whole role of the Constitution is to give you rights. But God already gave you your rights, so they're just redistributing rights.
Well, let's read the
Yeah, I did 360. I did lose it. I messed it up when I was shaving, and mustaches are actually really hard to maintain, to be honest with you.
That's why they're so special.
They're high maintenance.
Let's read it shows you can handle a woman in your life.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, I got about 15 minutes left, brother, and then I gotta jet because I got stuff that I gotta take care of this afternoon.
Gosh, Chuck.
I know. Sorry, my family and my wife are here now, so like I don't have as much like free time as I did.
I understand. Are you coming back for the big group stream tonight? Hopefully.
I would like to, but I may not tonight, because tonight starts Passover at sundown, so I may not be part of that. So.
Oh, you consider this business? This is a study, isn't this study?
Do what?
I said, wouldn't the Sabbath allow you to do this as study?
Yeah, I mean it's not for a work related thing. It's just because like I'll be doing family stuff with my family for Passover tonight. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
If we did it tomorrow, I'd be more than willing to. But I mean, I just may not be able to because I don't know how late our stuff's gonna go. So. Because it's a holiday for us, so like we ham it up and watch a movie, and like we watch not the Easter story, but you know, like the crucifixion and resurrection type movies, and like we have gyros and lamb, and it's kind of a fun time for us, and we just celebrate the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So, and we read the Bible and we talk about it, and you know, it's just a fun time for us. So
sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Well,
you'll have to do it with us one year. It's super fun.
Let's just read the Constitution then, and then figure out what you think about this. Now, it's.
Are you talking just the preamble or what?
The Constitution's real short. Oh, maybe it's a little long. We'll get into it and see how long it lasts. But not the Bill of Rights, the document itself. None of the amendments. And it's important to mention that we had the Articles of Confederation before the Constitution.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
George Washington, Benjamin Franklin were two primary figures at the writing of the Constitution.
Franklin, that was a guy. Whew.
Yeah, he was the first guy I got into, but I got into him as a kid, and I don't think I really understood him. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. By the way, where they got the word Constitution was from, it means health. It means makeup and health. And it was originally an English concept, the Constitution of the country. And it was an unwritten constitution considered to be the highest law.
The very first phrase, "We the people."
Huh?
Right?
We the people.
So did you elect them to speak on your behalf?
Well, they were elected. We are.
What is a people?
I mean, they were elected.
Okay, but the statement isn't "we the elected officials of the people." It says "we the people."
We the people. Well, the reason it can say that is because they sent it to all the different states to get ratified.
Okay.
It's accepted by all the people.
But the phrasing is what's important, because what is a people?
It's a.
See, this is where it gets conflagrated. It's because you don't even know what the words mean.
People.
Right. What is a people as a statute? What is a people? What is that? What does that mean? Because if you start to get into the legal definition of what a people is, or a people group, or a nation, it starts to it's the legalese of it. It is a contract. It is a legally enforced contract. And it's really interesting when you start to break it down. And I don't have my notes for that sitting in front of me right now. Maybe that's what we can talk about next week, is the actual legal. But go ahead and keep reading through it.
Well, it is the people of the United States. So it being ratified by a majority population of each individual state, I think legally justifies that sentence. What I more meant
is that a people is an illegitimate term, which makes the contract null and void right off the bat, because you as a person are a being, right? People is a fictional statement, because you can't have a people. It doesn't exist. You have a collection of persons, but people don't exist, because it's in the plural. It's not, it's in legal definition, it's not a real thing. There is only the individual. There cannot be a people, because a people is a fictional idea.
All right.
You see what I mean?
So,
it's because it is a collection of individuals. It's not a people.
Well, let's.
It's fascinating, man. It's fascinating when you start to break it down.
Sure. Well, let's keep reading.
Yeah, go ahead.
All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which he shall be chosen. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. Okay, so You think this whole thing is invalid because of the first sentence?
Yeah. It's literally to give you the illusion of rights so that they can make you a slave.
Huh. Well, what do we do about that, Chuck?
It's what I'm trying to uncover. Like it's that's why like I started to look at the Bible in terms like, okay, so if this is their legal document, then what's my legal document? What actually does give me rights as a person? Well, God is the only one that can actually give you rights as a person because he's the one that is the author and founder of everything. So he already gave you your book of rights, basically what you're entitled to. If this thing happens, then this is the ramification. If this thing happens, then this is the ramification. So if you start looking at the Bible in terms of being a legal document, like that's where you can substantiate all your rights from. And the only reason that there needs to be any other system of rights is because someone is usurping the authority of God and making you a slave to them instead of a slave to God, which Paul talks about really heavily in the New Testament. So,
in Hebrews,
being a slave to sin versus being a slave to righteousness, and calling no man master. And yes, Dan, I am celebrating Passover tonight. So.
Government is immoral. Well, people are immoral. So,
but correct. Which is the second half of what I was going to say is that people are immoral. So how can an immoral being make a moral document?
Can't. You can do as good as you can. That's why it says more perfect and not perfect. A more perfect union.
Like I said, and I don't think the
says,
people that framed the document were inherently thinking along the terms that I'm thinking of. Like, we're going to usurp the authority of God in making this document. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make all these people slaves. It's not the purpose of it, but it still accomplishes the same intent regardless.
Well, they were all steeped in the Bible, and they knew it back to front very well. Thomas Jefferson rewrote the Bible. You know what I mean? In a bad way, but he rewrote it.
I would say that the devil knows the Bible front to back, inward and outward.
And sorry, we just got a pizza.
No, it's cool.
You're right. The devil knows it back and forth. But if you, that's why it's important to look into these guys' personal lives and figure out what they thought. And if the founding fathers who wrote the Declaration of Independence, obviously the Declaration of Independence has more Christian rhetoric in it than the Constitution. In fact, the Articles of Confederation have more Christian rhetoric in it than the Constitution.
I would agree. Yeah.
And the groups of people who came up with these different documents were not all the same. Ben Franklin and George Washington, I believe, were the only two people to be in all three groups. But George Washington might not have been in the Articles of Confederation. I think Ben Franklin was in all three. Hey, okay, just give me a minute, please.
Well, listen, brother. You go ahead and go eat your pizza because I got a jet anyways. This is a fascinating topic and one that I really love talking about, especially with the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation, and that stuff is awesome. And I'd love to continue that conversation for sure.
What I was gonna say.
Keep going. Finish up your idea to get it out beforehand. But I'm just saying, like, don't feel like you got to keep going for another 10 minutes. And
no, I was coming to a very specific point. It seems to me because these guys knew the Bible very well. George Washington, John Adams, at least seemed to have a very involved Christian faith. If they made it to heaven at the end or not is not for me to say, but they at least thought about it all the time. And even Thomas Jefferson. It seemed to me that they were approaching it as we live in a fallen world with immoral people, and we have to act realistically. So me being the CEO of Google as a Christian, understanding that this is a satanic organization, what is the best pieces of words I can write on this paper to influence it towards Christ? That's how I always took it. And you have to understand, it's 170 people that were the founding fathers. It's a group of 100 people all arguing for a full hot day coming up with these documents. So it's not like any one person wrote it too. So They were just trying to represent themselves as best they could. And I never thought it was perfect, but what I actually think is God ordained it being written, which is true for all of history. So if you understand that, then you understand the Christianity that was in it, and you also understand that in the end, the government is the end of people. It's where the Antichrist comes from. You know, if I was going to remake a government today, I would read the Constitution, I would read the Declaration of Independence, I would read the Articles of Confederation, I would read the Magna Carta, and I would study the book of Deuteronomy. If that makes sense.
Good framework.
You know,
but I mean, like I said, it's obviously not a perfect document, and
it seems like one of
the more I dig into it, the more I find that I don't need it, since it doesn't grant me anything that I wasn't already granted. So, and they're slowly going to do away with it anyway, so that any original intent that it had to give you freedom or relief from religious persecution is slowly going to weed away anyways, to where they can they can do whatever they want. So they're slowly weeding our rights away for the illusion of safety, a little bit at a time anyhow right now. So, but it is interesting to dig back into the original intent of it. So
there's going to be a time in our lives where we have to create a whole new government. So it's good.
I do believe that is true. And whether it's because of lack of a current government existing, or whether because it has been destroyed, is one way or the other. I don't know. So
maybe we won't decide to unite all 13 states, the next time. You know what I mean? Because that probably made it a little complicated too.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Well, I got a jet, brother. So go enjoy your pizza. Have a great afternoon. And if I see you tonight, then great. If not, then it's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you again when I talk to you.
Sweet. It's good talking to you guys.
Thanks everybody for showing up, and I appreciate all the good comments. I know we didn't get to a ton of them, but we're short on time, so you guys made a lot of good points.
I'll hang out in the chat for a little bit after this if anyone wants to talk.
Cool.
So
sounds great, brother.
Catch you later.
All right. Bye.